Okay, so we're going to continue on slide 105, and this is about strategic improvement. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can handle this. I'm just going to show you one way, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible because it's not something that's typically done by a black belt, but I think you should see it, and I'm very happy to answer any questions later today during the quote office hours, or if you have a question, you can call me directly or email me. Happy to talk through this. What you find in here is going to be a structure called strategy maps, which is highly related to, this was a concept that was built by Kaplan and Norton in around 2004, and it complements something called the balanced scorecard, which is something that a lot of people use or try to use. And it was built because, well, quite frankly, when Kaplan and Norton went and audited a bunch of companies using balanced scorecard, they weren't doing it very effectively. So they said, you know, what we need to do is we need to build a picture. So the idea here is to just get an idea of how, if you wanted to say, well, let's make a picture of how my project fits into the benefits of this, or to the benefits for the company, how would I do that? So you can think of it that way. Or you can think about, you know, structuring a portfolio. I'm going to show you an example as well. Is anybody familiar with that concept of strategy maps or that technique? How about balanced scorecard? Okay, so we'll take it through we'll take it from the top. So. So I already said that this was developed by Kaplan and Norton. Let me just show you the picture. So here's the picture of a strategy map. I've simplified it very, very greatly. Okay, so there's a very greatly simplified strategy map. And the idea of a strategy map, the idea of Kaplan and Norton was that they said basically, the problem with with most organizations is they have all this intangible capital, and that could be their people, could be their information and information systems, and the company culture, right? How they organize and all that. That's all the intangible capital that that a company has. And a big problem with many companies is they struggle to make that valuable for both their customers and their shareholders. They built something that was basically this, that said, look, we're going to figure out what are the things that we're going to, what are the pieces of intangible capital that we're going to deal with. The broad categories are people, information, and organization, and we're going to deploy them in processes, and that those, so in other words, the whole thing kind of goes up, bubbles up, if you will. And there's two stop points. One is the customer and one is the financials. And the idea is we're going to take this and we're going to move it upward. Okay, so for example, if we're going to say, let's say training is one of those things that you'd have in people, right? I'm not saying this is a good project, but we're going to train everybody in Six Sigma. Okay, you might say, well, that's going to help us in operations, generally speaking, and it's going to help us provide a better price and a better quality to our customers and a better delivery, and that's going to lead to better margins. The quality and delivery is going to lead to better margins, and the price is going to lead to additional revenue growth because we'll be able to capture more customers or have a bigger market. Okay, so that might be one way I would map this sort of thing. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. Now over here on the right-hand side, if you recall, one of the things that we set up on the first day was this, along with the process, where we said that these were y's and these were x's, and this was a function, right? This was the f of x. And so the idea was y equals f of x. In other words, y, the output is a function of what we put into it and what we do with it, right? The process is the function. When we talk about big Y's, we're talking about, by the way, not everybody uses this notation. It's one of the most maddening things about Six Sigma is that since it's interdisciplinary, people use lots of different terms for outputs, inputs. We're later going to talk about responses, independent variables, dependent variables. Here we're calling them big Y's, and a lot of people use that here. So this means, this literally means this, y equals f of x, big Y, and this means little y equals f of x. What's the distinction? Well, the little y's are more, they're more operational. They're more tangible. They cycle quicker. The big Y's are things like return on equity, net promoter score, customer satisfaction. The little Y's would be things like average handle time and things like that. Amount of capacity in being used in X process or whatever. Cycle time of a process. This all make sense to folks?
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to show you an example. So basically that's it. I don't want to show any more of this other than kind of giving an example. The idea is, for example, if I were doing an accounts receivable project, that might involve operations, and it might help me on quality and delivery, and that might drive productivity in our company. The idea is just to map it and make sure that you can map it. Find that a lot of people just have a hard time articulating what is the real business case for this, and this sort of strategy map can help. Now, if you're designing a portfolio, it can work as well the other way, to say, you know, what sort of projects are going to work well, to what should we tee up in operations, customer management, innovation, regulatory, and social. Okay, we've got an exercise that's going to do that, but let me show you an example from a company that I worked for to help put this together. Now, I did not do this. I don't want to portray it as me doing it all, because I certainly did not. I worked with a team of people to do this, but here's an example at a healthcare company where we did this. Okay, and I've got it backwards. So here's the strategy map. Let me see if I can make that big so you can see it. So here's the strategy map, and you can see that there's a couple, you can see at the bottom, this is intangible capital. Right here, we've got technology, we've got employees, and we've got culture. Sounds exactly like we talked about. Here are the different things that we need to do. Here are the different initiatives. Okay, expand employee knowledge, develop business understanding, increase system flexibility. I think you get it. Here are the internal processes all along this red, blue, and green that we're going to try and hit. So we've got quality and speed and simplification. Pretty straightforward stuff, and so forth. And then here are here's how we're going to increase the customer satisfaction. This is how we're trying to do it. We're going to be easier to do business with. We're going to provide a seamless experience. We're going to get the service right every time. And then here is the business value up at the top, reducing administrative costs, for example. Now you can see that they've got three sort of verticals. This particular company didn't use a plain vanilla. They've got this vertical right here, which is reducing administrative costs. I guess the bottom one is, it applies to all. They've got this one, which is decreasing the medical cost trend. So again, this was a insurer. And over here, it's attract and retain customers. So this is all about growth right here. So anyway, so that's how they were able to sort of structure what projects they had. And here was the cool thing about it, is that for every one of these bubbles, they have a metric. So this looks almost exactly the same, but now these are metrics that they're going to use to evaluate each of these boxes. So it's pretty cool. So for example, to the high-level metric for determining whether a customer has a seamless experience is the number of transfers per call volume. Not saying it's perfect, but it's an interesting one. Okay? And here, getting the service right every time, they're going to look at the number of members impact. A member is a customer and health insurer divided by the total number of members that they have. Okay? And on some of the quality, for example, on improving the quality, they have something called rolled throughput yield. We're going to talk about that metric later in the course, for sure. Anyway, so that's what a real serious process maps or a strategy map looks like. And I know it's fairly complex, but I thought you wanted to see the real. I thought you might like to see the real thing. Okay. Oops. Okay. So, what questions do you have on strategy maps or strategic improvement before we move on?
I had one question. Can you go back to the slide?
Which one?
The example you showed.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. This slide right here.
Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to understand, I guess, what the definition of the member focus lane is. Like, what that's really. I guess that's the improvement you're focused on. Do you have the process what you're really focused on improving?
The member focus. This
yeah.
one. Yeah, so this is analogous to this is the results that you want to see in the customer. So this, let me choose a different color. This line right here these are the results that you want to see for the customer.
This is your measurement?
This is the, no, this is just the statement. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, this is the measurement. You're right. This is better, right here. This is the statement. So in this lane, which is all about reducing administrative costs, the way that we're going to do, at least the equivalent ones in the customer lane are, I want this to be, we want to be easy to do business with for the customer. We want to give that customer a seamless experience, and we want to be right the first time, right every time.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Whereas in here, this is a slightly different goal, right? From the customer, we're going to try and increase the confidence in the brand in order to attract them, and that may require very different projects, leveraging different things like creating new product solutions or enhancing channels or whatever. Okay, good question. What other questions do you have? Okay. All right, so let us, as the rabbit said, move on then. So we will go to, let's see, we're going to skip a couple because I'm going to leave process thinking for you guys to do the reading on that. I don't think that you'll have any trouble with this, and we've talked a lot about it. So we're going to skip through that one. And also team management. I want you to take a look through this, but a lot of what we're going to talk about, I want you to think about in terms of the book that we're going to read, which is Bringing Out the Best in People. So we'll talk a little bit about that. An interesting thing, I think I'll share the article with you because I found it interesting. Did anybody else read the article in the Times about how to get, that was just published this week in the New York Times about studies on teams? I'll share that with you guys. I think you'll find it interesting, but and I haven't been able to. I just read the Times article. I haven't been able to look at any of the supporting documentation yet, but their findings were very interesting in that they found that, and I'm being totally honest with everybody here. They found two things. They found that teams where more equal participation was occurring were outperformed other teams, which is interesting. They found no difference in terms of makeup of race. They found no difference, but they found a significant difference in teams that in gender, and they found and guys, I hate to say this, but they found that teams with women on them and with more women did outperform teams with men. like I said, I haven't looked at it anymore. I'll share the article with you, but it was very interesting. And I think it might even be worth a bit of a discussion as to why, how could that be, and why would that be. But I'll share that with you. I think you'll find it interesting. Okay, I didn't even get a laugh out of that. That's pretty pathetic, or a sigh, or a moan, or something. Okay, I don't think you'll find any. I don't think you'll find any difficulties with this either. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about project management. Again, this is at a high level, and just making sure that we have this. Now, much of the project management that we set up in a DMAIC project is in the define phase, and so what I want to do is I want to share with you, some of the must-haves, and then kind of get your opinion on some of this. So I know Regina, you're a certified PM. Is it a certified PMO through the PMI? Or
yes,
not PMO, PM, certified PM through the PMI.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So and I think we had a discussion about this. It's kind of like there's theory and there's practice, and I don't know about you, but well, let me just ask. I mean, I certainly don't want to cast aspersions on project managers, because it's a thankless job, and good project managers are worth their weight in gold for sure. But has anybody ever run in with a project manager where they had to do everything exactly by the book, and it just seemed like it was just so onerous to update everything and to do it with that? I don't know. I'll throw that out, but I'll answer it myself and say I have for sure. So I'm going to give my opinion on this, and I'd love to have whatever pushback you have. That's great. I want to hear about it, but I'd love to have a bit of a discussion about this. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things in here, and let me just use my pink pen right here. We're going to talk about a project charter, which is probably the most important documentation, and some of the elements in that project charter. We're going to talk a little bit about a business case, a problem statement, a goal statement, scope, and there are some other things that are in there, and I'll ask you, what are some of the other things that you might want to put in. How many of you have? I just want to make sure there's. Are we all good with? We know what a project charter is. We've done these before.
I'm good.
Yep.
Yes. No. Okay. Good. So we'll just kind of cover this, I think, pretty quickly, but just keep in mind. This is one of those important things. This is one of those things I think Steve said before, where you do need to take some real time with this to get it right. Okie doke. All right. So why don't we just kind of jump into it instead of kind of this is where we are. We're going to be talking about, say, making the business case throughout this section. There's another section where we'll talk about scheduling. That's next week. Okay, so let's talk about project charter first. And instead of just going through the slides, what I want to do is I want to just ping you. We've all done project charters. What are some important things to include in a project charter? First of all, I guess let's start out with what is it? What is a project charter? Since you've done them before, what is a project charter? Anybody?
Shows the objectives and the scope of a project.
Okay, those are some of the things that it has in there. It has objectives and scope. Oops, and scope. Great. And we'll ping on this first, but let's just get a high-level sort of, you don't have to be Webster's dictionary, but just a somewhat of a definition of what a project charter is.
A statement of what we're trying to accomplish with the effort?
Yeah, it's a statement. Some people like to say it's a contract. And who is it? So I'm going to put this here. It's not usually a legal contract, but it's a statement of what we're trying to accomplish. And who is it a statement for? And who is it a statement for?
To me, the project manager and the sponsor.
Project manager, sponsor. Who else? I think those are two key players for sure. Who else?
Higher management.
Perhaps other management, right?
Maybe the remaining project team, stakeholders.
Yep. Project team and other stakeholders. We'll just put management and other stakeholders. Okay. Good. Good. So it's a contract really between, it's a statement, it's meant to be shared, and it's meant to be understood by all of these folks, right? Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about what some of the things, I think we've already said. So objectives and scope, real important to put in a project charter. What else do you put in a project charter? Anybody?
Sometimes you'll have your risk statements, your assumptions, your constraints.
Okay, risks, assumptions, constraints. Love it. So when you say risks, what would be an example of a risk that you put in there?
Okay. One I can think of is if your project has to do with new regulation coming in, there's always a risk that, let's say they publish the regulation in January, or they're going to publish it next January, or make it official next January, I should say. So they've published, what the requirements are. You start working on it, and 3 months before it becomes effective, they change the regulation, or they change a requirement of the regulation. So that could be a risk.
Got it. Okay, excellent. So that would be an example. Other examples could be direct project risks. So, for example, everybody knows that John is a guy that knows how to execute like gangbusters, and everybody wants John on their project, and we all know that John is allocated at 200%. So John might be pulled from this project is a risk. So that might be something that you might want to put down and air or whatever. So anyway, that can go on there. And constraints might be things like we aren't going to engage IT in the solutions to any of these projects, or something like that. So it can sometimes be related to scope as well. Okay. What else? So risks, assumptions, constraints, scope. What else?
I also like to include the list of those stakeholders that we spoke to on the other side there, the project manager, the sponsors, all the team members, and what area they represent.
Very
how
good.
To contact them.
So, very good. So let's explode that. Let's expand that a little bit to call it roles and responsibilities, right? Now, we don't have to be super deep on all this. Roles and responsibilities, right? So if I have a project lead, who's a project lead? If I have a project manager, who's a project manager? If I have a sponsor, who's a sponsor? Right? It needs to be in there. Excellent. Okay, what else?
You have scope up there, so it should include in scope and almost as important out of scope.
In and out of scope. Okay, great. Okay, here are some other things. Great. These are all great. Let me just add in some other things that you might think about putting in. Along with the objectives, you might also put the measurements, right? How are we going to measure to determine that we made it? What does success look like, right? We might also put a problem. What is the problem that we're trying to solve, and what is the business case? So, in other words, the problem is what we're trying to solve. The business case is what we get by solving it, right? So these are some of the things that I would put in the charter, so I think that I think we if you feel comfortable with this, if there's other things that we need to add in, that's great. Now, and we can add those in, or we can have a discussion. But I want to ask you also, because it's meant to really be a statement of understanding. would you agree that one of the most important things is that it needs to be the project charter needs to communicate easily and effectively, right? So I am a huge proponent of having project charters be very short. I hate 40-page project charters. I don't think they benefit, I won't say they don't benefit anybody. They do. But I just don't see the reason for a DMAIC project charter that's that long. I like to keep them to a couple of pages. And in fact, I have a couple of one-page examples that I often use, and I'm going to show to you, that I often use in projects, and I'll put them in my weekly communications. Okay, so let me just show you a couple of examples of those. Here is, I think somebody may recognize this one. Some things are redacted here, but here is an example of a project charter for QA sample size reduction implementation, or it was right sizing. So here you have the objectives on the top. You have a business case summary right here. So this is all about measurement and making it's going to benefit the customer, it's going to benefit the company. This is the company's name. And here are the goals that we need to be able to do, including a timeline for completion. We didn't say that before, but that's often a real important thing to put in the charter. Here's what's in and out of scope. So to Regina's point, or to Tammy's point, having both in and out of scope is important. And you can see that this was something that we executed on. Here are some people that were, here are the roles and responsibilities on the core team. You can see on the bottom there's a few straight line people. And this was my team on that one. Anyway, so that's an example of one. And this is something that you can put up in every stand-up meeting that you have. And let people object to it if they have any additions or things that need to be changed. They can talk about how we want to change it. Here is one other example of a charter I want to show you. So here's another one-pager. This was done with a this was actually a design project for a health insurer that was intended to improve the order to quote process. So it's a sales process, an underwriting process. But again, the same sort of thing. They wanted to call it a narrative instead of a objective. So that's what this is right there. It's sort of a narrative of why we're doing and what the background, the story is. Here's a business case story, or here's a business case summary. Here's what some of the goals are. Here's the project scope. And here's the core team. And you can see that there's a lot of stuff in here. Again, we were in this, but so were a number of other people. And this was something that was put again into everything that we had. Here is a more here is a very detailed, or a much more detailed in-scope, out-scope picture that we developed in terms of here's what's in scope in terms of the process. Here's what's in scope in terms of the systems that are there, in terms of the product types and characteristics, and in terms of the customer segments, which customer segments are in and which ones are out. Here's what's out of the process, post-sales, prospecting, nope, that's not in. Here are the systems that are not in, anything post-sale, prospecting database. Here are the product types, they're all in. And here are the customer segments that are out of scope. Medical group scales. This is individual, what I've redacted here, but they had a proprietary name for it. Here is a small group and individual Medicare and dental. All that's out of scope. So it's a picture that people can look at and say what's in, what's out helps. Because, you know, sometimes it's easy to define things about what's in, and sometimes it's easy to define what's out of scope, so it's helpful to have both. Okay. My third slide was always the Gantt chart, but we'll cover that next time. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to folks. Okay. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but here's more of a detailed one. If you're going to go into 2 pages, you have here's what we had before: a business case, project scope, goal summary, team, and then if you have a second page or something like that, you can put on high-level project plan, measurements, benefits forecast, toll gate status, something like that we were talking about before. You could put risks. This one doesn't have risks. I recommend that one as well. Okay. Hopefully that makes some sense to folks. What questions do you have on the project charter before we move on? Or comments? Take comments as well. I've seen some good, bad, ugly project charters in my day. Okay. Well, we will move on. I'm going to take a moment to just mention this. I wish I would have called this business case narrative, because we're going to talk about putting together a full business case next week. That will include all the things that John, you're an accountant, right? Oh, maybe John's not, maybe John is not connected with the audio right now. Well, anyway, I know we've got an accountant in our group today, but in any event, the business case, what we're talking about, what we'll talk about next time, are things like if you're an accountant, you'll be very fluent with. Right here, we're just talking about the narrative, and the narrative of the business case really needs to get to why are we doing this project, why should we do it now, and how does it align with other business initiatives and things like that. And what are the financial implications of this?
We're back.
Oh, hey, John.
Sorry about that. We hung up on you.
Oh, no, that's okay. No sweat. It happens once in a while. It happens once in a while. I was just asking you. I think you're going to be all set with when we get to the spreadsheet part of this. The spreadsheet part of estimating the value of a project. So we're going to do a little bit of that next week, and we have a couple of assignment questions with that. But here we're just talking about articulating it. My advice to you, I guess, would be if, you guys are probably pretty well versed in doing this, but my advice would be to just try out a couple and to hit on a couple of the areas. Whoops, I don't want to do that. A couple of the areas that you're going to hit on in this is, if you can talk about how it's going to decrease cost, right? That's margins. Make your margins better. If you're going to talk about how it's going to increase revenue, and you can talk about how it's going to satisfy customers or employees, that's going to help you go a long way. Okay, I know that's very, very high level, but in a lot of ways, this isn't rocket surgery, folks. Business cases need to decrease cost or increase revenue. It's just a question of putting it together in speak that makes sense to you and your team, and to other people, so they're going to go, yeah, we really do need to do this project. Okay, don't want to overdo this one, so I'm going to move on.org. Okay. We talked a little bit about defining scope. Here's that in-scope, out-scope tool. But I showed you an example of that one, and hopefully that helped in terms of understanding what was there. Here's some questions, however, that I find that are helpful for a lot of people to do this. And so I'd like you to take a moment and read this over. And I want you to put a star on what you think would be one of the more important ones that you're going to focus on, or that might help you get an answer. And so when you do what's in scope and what's out scope, this is, maybe this will be a question that sticks in your mind and you'll ask it. So I want you to go through and put a star on one that strikes you, that just strikes your fancy. Take 15 seconds to do that. or 30 seconds to do that. You got to read it. Okay, let's kind of go around the room, and we'll ask, what you pick and why. So let me start out with Tammy. So Tammy, what question did you mark as a star?
I put, will we utilize existing platform or build or buy? So the third one from the bottom.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I mean that one comes up in a lot of IT projects for sure.
Yeah, because we do have I do have some IT work that's going to need to be done, but there is also a lot of work that has been done on all the little parts I'm trying to bring together. So can we utilize what's there, or do we need to revamp everything?
Mm-hmm. Got it. Got it. Steve, what was the one that you starred?
Something as Tammy, as we talked to you, Mark, is that the process we're looking at is very labor intensive by its nature.
Yep.
So we did a walkthrough the other day. First thing we are asking ourselves is, will we need to automate certain things, which would mean capital investments and so on.
Right.
So that's something that we'll have to look at.
Right, and a key question there, and I should have jumped all over this with when Tammy brought it up as well. Not with Tammy, but jumped all over it. Is that we used to call it paving the cow paths. So you don't want to pave the cow paths. What does that mean? You don't want to install a automation solution where you still have a bad process that's left there, right? So then all you do is you institutionalize the bad process that you had before. So it's real important to also think about when you're saying, hey, I need to make this capital investment, I want to do it and lay it over something that's already good, right? I want to automate something that's good. Okay, great. Let's see, Regina, what did you select?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay, great. I selected what, if any, constraints must the team work under?
Okay. And why did you select that one?
Because if I know what the constraints are, then everything else is up for grabs.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Dan, what was the one that you selected?
So Mark actually selected the very first one, product services and processes that we focus on, because I really think if we're not careful, we could bite off too much of a project, and it could expand to be half the factory versus a lot more laser focused.
Yep. Get it. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Awesome. Michael?
Yeah, I was really looking at the first one or second one more than anything. I'm really trying to understand just more of the baseline process, or the baseline issue, because I don't want to get too far into solutioning at this point.
That makes a lot of sense. That's another benefit of, you were the one who gave the great elevator speech of DMAIC, but that's another benefit of DMAIC, right? Following that process, it gets you to think about baselining, say, before you solution, right? So all good stuff. Excellent. And last but certainly not least, John?
What constraints must the team work under?
Okay.
Because we could find ourselves pulling more into it. We need to, I think, define what it is, because it is labor intensive, as Steve said. So I think establishing constraints is as important as anything else.
Awesome. Okay, excellent. So those are just some things that hopefully these starting questions can help you with determining some of the scope, or just help with the project in a general sense. Good. What questions do you have on the in-scope, out-scope tool? All right, I showed that example. Hopefully that was illuminating in terms of how this stuff works, or how it can work. A picture goes a long way with a lot of people. So you'll also have some practice in doing it. Okay, I'm not going to talk about project title. That's ridiculous, so I don't know why I ever put that slide in. That's an in-process improvement for me. I need to take that out next time. I do want to talk a little bit about a problem statement. In a Six Sigma DMAIC project where we're making improvements, we need to have, generally speaking, a very clear and concise problem statement. So what is it? It's usually a one or two sentence statement about what's causing pain and who it's causing pain to, and what is the cost if you can, right? So that's essentially the pain to the business is the cost, and you also want to maybe talk about why it's causing pain to the customers or to employees or whatever. I just as an aside, I've seen plenty of problem statements and that where clearly they were designed by committee and they were pages long. You cannot motivate a team, just like with a mission statement. You can't have a mission statement that's half a page long. You can't have a problem statement that is super long. It needs to be concise so that the team can rally around it and be consistent. Say, yes, this is what we're trying to solve. Let's go through a couple of problem statements. Here's one that's not a bad problem statement. It's okay. And we'll talk about what are the characteristics of this. So I'll read the problem statements. Since October of 2011, our customer return rate on product ABC, this is obviously a generic company, has grown from 0.5% to 0.3%. That's a bad thing, right? This has resulted in an average rework cost of X dollars and a decrease in customer satisfaction. Now, there's a couple of good things that are in here. First of all, it's nice and short. It's not a super long statement. So what are some of the other things that are helpful? Well, it provides dates. It says since October of 2011. Now, this is a little bit old, so I'll need to update this to maybe make it 2014. But it provides dates. Now, that's going to help scope out how we're going to gather data. We're not going to gather data from 2010 because it's not relevant. Identifies a clear and quantifiable metric, in this case customer return rate, that we might even use as our key output metric in the project. It expresses pain in terms of cost, in this case X dollars. We don't have the answer to exactly what that is, but it's nice to have that placeholder. We'll go back later and figure out what that is as we go through. It helps define the scope of the project, both in terms of the time, but also notice that we're talking about product ABC. We're not talking about product XYZ or DEF. We're talking about product ABC. So the simple example there is in the optical table one, you're focusing on just the optical tables. And the Tammy, if Tammy's doing an agent appointment or an appointment project, if you focused on only certain types of providers or maybe only providers from the Mid-Atlantic region, that would be you'd want to identify that in the problem statement. Another thing is that it doesn't have a lot of jargon in it. I hate reading a problem statement that when you go outside the group, nobody understands it. Sometimes it's necessary to have a little bit of jargon in there, and that's okay. But I like to try and keep it so that someday I'm going to eat my words on this, but I like to try and keep it so that my parents could understand it. So I'm sure that my kids will say the same thing to me very soon, in fact. And finally, the most important thing is it doesn't have a solution in it. I've seen so many problem statements that have solutions in them. You don't want to have problem statements that have solutions in them. Okay. Without further ado, and like I said, the number one problems I've seen is that they often have solutions in them. Some other issues are they're too vague, or people assign blame. That's a very, very bad idea. Don't do that in your problem statements. If we go to, I want to do just a couple of exercises here in class. We'll do, let's see, if we can go to slide 163. Let's take a minute and evaluate this problem statement. read it over, see if you can make it better. See, one of the things you can do is go through that checklist on slide, what slide was that? Slide, slide, why am I having such trouble finding it? Slide 157. You look at evaluated with 157. Just take another 30 seconds or so to do that one. Okay. Without being too ridiculous about this, is this a perfect problem statement? What do you think?
You're joking, right?
Yes, I am joking. I am joking. Yeah. So, well, what are some of the problems with it? Where do you start? Is the difficult to talk about.
What does skyrocket mean? It's measurable.
Yeah.
Yes. So it has definitely. It's very vague. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the only thing it says it has going for it is it says something about July of last year. It doesn't say which year it was, but it scopes it. I don't know what operational costs are. That's pretty. I get the impression that Dan, as you had said, this is going to be it's going to involve half the company or more.
Right.
A decrease in profitability. I don't know what's going on there. So obviously this team has a lot to do to tighten this this one up. All right, let's take a look at the next one. I think this one is maybe a little more interesting. Let's take a look at this one and evaluate this this problem statement. And let me know what you think.
To me, it feels like the last sentence is already, they're saying what the root cause is. They already feel like they've identified what they want to improve with the redundancies and things like that.
You got it. I think that's the number one problem with this one, is that it's all over the place, isn't it? And that it's violating the number one rule, and that is that you can't have solutions in there.
It's also kind of blaming.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's kind of blaming people, isn't it? How would you feel if you were on the IT team and you were also sitting in that? Really, this was my problem? But yeah, if you're on this team, is it because, am I trying to reduce redundancies? Am I trying to standardize things? Am I trying to remove manual steps? Maybe I'm trying to do all of those things, and we shouldn't say what some of those solutions are. So I think again, the same sort of thing. If you can nail it down to sort of what the pain is, put in what you think you might measure. If you leave something as a placeholder, you can always validate it later, and especially when you get into the measure phase. And that does happen, and that's actually one of those things that people ask about toll gates before. It's hard to talk about this without talking about the toll gate, but one of the reasons why it's important to have a defined toll gate, the measure toll gate, is because sometimes you get information that says, this project really shouldn't continue. That happens. There was a project at a financial service customer that I worked with. They have something called a NIGO, which stands for not in good order. So it's like when you send, and this happens a lot. I just applied for my mother to get Medicaid. And from a lot of the companies, they had to get their financial statements. They sent me back a very nasty letter saying my request was not in good order. But in any event, the point is that they have to spend more money in rework if you send in an application, say, for a loan or for an annuity or something like that, and they have to come back at you and get more information. Well, that all sounds great. Yeah, it's a real defect, and everybody said it was a problem. And this particular company, they were doing a project, and when they got to the measure phase, they had found that they had 6 in the previous year, and they estimated the cost of these to be an average of $10. So I'm sorry, but you're just not going to do this project. They were a Fortune 40 company. So it doesn't make sense to do the project. Or they were a Fortune 100 company, I should say. It just doesn't make sense to do the project for $60. So anyway, you can leave that as a placeholder. Okay, the only other thing I want to talk about in here and mention is back on well, I'm sorry, if we go back to 159, we've covered these. Now we know what those, basically we've seen some good, bad, and really ugly problem statements. A problem statement can be revised throughout the DMAIC process. When you start out, it's really sort of, you know, it's not totally vague. You want it to be tight, but let's call it 80% tight. But as you go through in the measure phase, you can refine that problem statement after you collect some data or gain some insight. And you can actually help in the improve phase to keep your bearings in terms of, are we really solving, does this really solve our problem? And again, in the control phase, you can really say, use your problem statement as a yardstick to say, did we really solve this problem? There's other things that you can put up against there too, like measurements and things like that, but it's always good to have something that's in real language that people can latch onto. All right. I'm not going to talk a lot about the goal statement, but essentially the goal statement should simply be a turnaround of the problem statement. If you are going to put together a goal statement, it's really what are the things that, it's really a turnaround of the problem statement. So if you have a problem statement that says, you know, average handling times in our call center are too long, and this is costing us a lot of money from an efficiency, and it's costing us employee capacity, and it's hurting our customers because they need to be, we want to be more concisely dealing with them more quickly. They want a fast transaction as well. Goal statement would be a turnaround of that. By January, by April of 2015, we are going to reduce the average handling time to X per transaction, and we're going to increase customer satisfaction to Y, or whatever. It's just a turnaround of the goal statement. I'm sorry, the problem statement. Now, you've probably also been around the block long enough to hear about SMART goals. It's here. I'm just putting it up. If you have a question about it, that's wonderful. But I'm ready to move on. Have we all seen this before?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Great. If you haven't seen it before, give me a call and we'll talk about it and give you a few examples. But I think we're good to move on. All right. So we've come to the end of this section, and I think we're probably going to, I'm going to defer these, since I do think the customer section is going to be a something we do want to talk more about and have a bit of a discussion about. I think we'll probably want to end here. I don't want to try and rush anything. But we've covered in this section, which was, I think, one of the more important things, we covered the project charter and all the elements. And I think to Steve's point earlier, this is really a key thing to get right in the defined phase. So do spend some time putting together a project charter that is easy for people, for sponsors and team members to evaluate. Put together a good problem statement. Spend some time working on that business case, right, which is the narrative of what we get when we fix the problem, what are the benefits from it. Do talk and spend some time on the process, I'm sorry, on what the scope is. Okay. And I'll stop there. You've got the DMAIC Navigator. I think we talked about that, so that's a good thing to do. And we'll cover customer focus next time. And the only ask I have is that I just sent the homework out, or the assignment out to you. One of the things in the assignment is to go through the slides and fill out these guys, the Lean Six Sigma journals. So if you haven't done that, I think that's going to be helpful up to this point. I'm not asking you to do it for customer focus, but I think it would be really helpful if you read through the slides and just to see up through slide 178. So that's not a heck of a lot. Just so that we can talk about it next time and I don't have to cover slides. I think you guys already understand all this stuff, and this is just a review of what's there. I want to get on quickly to 3 things that you may not have heard of, and these are really techniques to develop like a laser beam focus on what metrics are you going to use. The Kano model, the CTQ tree, and the voice of the customer metrics, and then we'll go hot and heavy into the SciPoc as well. So next Tuesday, we're really going to do much more nitty-gritty tool-based stuff and stuff that's really going to be, I think, very valuable for your project. So, so that's it for today, guys. I'm going to stop and ask, what questions do you have? But before I do, have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday. I have my office hours proper from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock today, so if you want to call into that anytime during that time period and ask me questions, feel free to do so. But as I said, we don't have to limit ourselves to that. You can call me anytime or try and schedule an appointment. That's fine too. You can email me. All right, guys, so have a great weekend.
Mark, one question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You mentioned early in the call that there was 1 week we weren't having class. Did I hear that right?
There are 2 weeks. The 2 weeks.
So
oh, go ahead.
Which weeks are we not having class?
Great. February 3, the week of February, I think it's 2 through 6, and the week of March 9th through 13th. There are
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. There are placeholders that are on the calendar, but instead of, it's an Outlook nightmare to send those out then cancel. I just left those dates in there in there. But we're not having class those weeks.
And we end the 27th. I don't think my invite had an end date either. Or let's see.
Mine ends in like 2030.
Yeah, that should be it. Oh, in 2030? What? No, that shouldn't be it.
Yeah, mine goes all year.
All right. Okay, so let me take care of that this afternoon. Okay, that'll be my first order of business.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, have a great weekend, guys.
All right.
This is Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Are the homework assignments on the folders you set up for me?
Oh, yes. No, not yet, but I will put one in.
Okay.
Did you not get the email?
Hold on, let me see what came through real quick here. So, okay, no, that came through. The PowerPoint, the A1.
Yeah,
everything there that I need.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm good then.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. See ya. Okay. If there are no questions, no further questions, I will stop and see you later.